Good evening. Welcome to our webinar designed to help you become a better runner and to avoid injury. I am Dick Patterson, president of the Advanced Spine and Sports Chiropractic Bucks 5K series. Today's webinar is presented by Marshall Financial Group, and we have the honor of Marshall's Paula Nangle hosting us today. Paula is the president and senior wealth advisor at Marshall and has been with the company since 2009. And here's something to consider. A fun fact, Paula is actually a retired age group triathlete. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you for that introduction. I hope everyone, all the attendees have had a chance to funnel into the meeting. I know sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get started. But I want to say that Marshall Financial is proud to be a sponsor of the Bucks 5K series and this informative webinar. I'd also like to give a big thank you to Advanced Spine and Sports Chiropractic for once again being a title sponsor. So just lay out the agenda for this evening. So first we'll have our introductions, and then we will hear from Gert Fries, who will give us some tips on how to add some fun into our daily runs and training routine, and also how to become a stronger runner. And then Dr. Johnny King Marino will spend some time talking about 5 common running injuries and how to avoid them. We will have time at the end for Q&A. So if you can submit those questions throughout the webinar, and we will take them at the end as time permits. So at Marshall, we are all about helping clients live their happiest, healthiest, most productive lives. So just like being physically fit supports a happier, healthier life, we believe having a sound financial plan is integral to overall well-being. A little bit about Marshall. We are an independent registered investment advisor. All of our wealth advisors are certified financial planners and fiduciaries, acting in your best interest. And I'm really proud to say that we are 100% employee owned. Marshall Financial has been in the community for over 40 years, and through decades of working with entrepreneurs, businesses, and families through multiple generations, we've developed a very holistic life planning approach that helps bring peace of mind to you and your family. We partner with busy professionals to help you develop a sound financial plan, help you make informed decisions so you can enjoy your wealth today while having confidence in your future. We value this community, and we're really proud to be a sponsor of the Bucks County 5K series. Participating in Bucks 5K series is a great way for you to support the community and also stay active. I just want to encourage everyone to go to the Bucks 5K series website and register for the upcoming races. The next one is on April 24th. It's the Booking for Looking. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Gert Fries. I think I have 2 slides here, yeah. So Gert is a certified personal trainer and running coach with over 16 years in the fitness industry. Believing that health and well-being are at the foundation of everything we do, Gert strives to find what will motivate and work for each individual person to take these steps to enjoy a healthier lifestyle, achieve their goals, and have fun doing it. She's also the director of the Bucks 5K series and has run over 15 ultra marathons and 35 marathons in the past 25 years. So with that, I will turn it over to Gert.
Thanks, Paula. I am so honored to be here. So thank you and Dick for inviting me to do this. And I hope everybody gets at least one takeaway from this webinar. The topics I'm covering today are the benefits of running and adding fun back into your running and things to do to become a stronger runner. So benefits of running. As runners, we all see, and do, know why we started running, whether it was for health reasons or maybe you came home from school and your mom said, go run around the block. Regardless, you know, we started running at one point, and, you know, we're reaping the benefits of all that. You know, it's a good stress reliever. It's, you know, burns fat, meeting new people, which is one of my favorite reasons why I run. I get to, you know, enjoy meeting new people. So again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I think as runners, we all know the benefits. So what I'm going to do is go into, you know, back into the enjoyment of running. You know, this last year has been a little trying time for us with running. You know, kind of some people have lost their mojo with running. And so, you know, these are some of the things that creative ideas that come up for running. Now, not all these aren't, you know, new ideas. A lot of them have been around a long time. It's just, you know, we just kind of raised up to the to this level to get these done. So, you know, going on a scavenger hunt run, this was kind of fun during the summer. You know, people would go out like for 4th of July, you know, go find an American flag, go find this, go find that. And, you know, you got points for all that and how many miles you ran while you were doing it. This was really cool. Create a map art design. So at the end of last year, there was a group that said, go out and create, what did 2020, you know, mean to you, or, you know, or how are you going to kick, this one was for, you know, a boot kick 2020 out. This one obviously was, you know, what the coronavirus looked like to them. So, you know, just these really cool ideas to get your mojo back into running. A lot of people thought, oh, you know, just kind of lost it. The races were gone and things were happening. So these were a lot of fun ideas that people have. Go run in the snow and the rain. That was kind of fun. Just go out and be a kid again. And this one really kind of near and dear to my heart. It's like, you know, go dedicate your run to somebody. There was this guy in Texas that, yes.
Do you want to share your slides? We're not seeing them.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. You seen it now? Are you seeing the slides now?
Yeah, I can see it. We can see them now.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So let me go back to show the, you know, this was what I was saying about the, you know, the map art designs. They're kind of really kind of cool ideas that, you know, people came up with. And this one was, you know, dedicating your run to somebody. This gentleman in Texas lost his son to leukemia, and, you know, started running and dedicating his runs to his son and all of his son's friends. And so every day he would go out and run a different kid's, you know, child's name. And, you know, it takes a little time, and it, you know, kind of, you know, it gives you a reason to run. So, you know, it's kind of a cool idea. Remember why you started running, you know, and celebrate you on your birthday. Go run your age. You know, if you're going to be 45, go run 4.5 miles, you know, or the date of your birthday, 23rd. You know, maybe you're not going to run 23 miles, but, you know, maybe be creative with your math. Be it 6 miles, 2 times 3, whatever it is. But just really kind of find the run of enjoyment of running again. And this also makes you a stronger runner. I think sometimes we get so caught up in, you know, trying to make our run faster. If you sometimes just step back and say, why am I running, and what's it mean? And, you know, I used to enjoy it. Well, start enjoying again, and you might become a stronger runner just by, you know, just by default. So here we are. Like, okay, how do you become a stronger runner? Well, first thing is, I think, is you got to set a running goal. And a running goal doesn't have to be anything really crazy. Just has to be a goal. And as the thing says, if your plan isn't working, you know, change the plan, not the goal. So whether your goal is running, you know, a 5K, you know, 10 seconds faster, or whatever it is, just set a goal. And then you have to kind of put a plan together. What do you got to do to reach your goal? And determine if there's anything in particular you have to work on. Is it your form? Is it your cadence? Is it your, you know, running up hills better? Like, whatever it is, we all as runners have a specific area that we may need to work on. And the other thing is, have a realistic goal. The goal has to be realistic, and you have to have enough time to reach that goal. You can't reach a goal, you know, in a week's time. You know, again, you have to be very realistic, and you got to have the time to do it. So so now what do you have to do to get there? As runners, we all hear this: speed work, fartleks, hills running, tempo / threshold runs, negative splits, building strength, increase endurance. Improve your running form. Get cross-train, so important. Run with someone slightly faster than you, and pre-warm up and post-stretching routines. Now, I could spend hours on all of these, but let's just pick out a couple of them and talk about those. So I'm going to pick out tempo runs. I personally think this is one of the very strong runs that you should do as you're preparing to be stronger. And your tempo run, by definition, is a pace that's 20 seconds per mile slower than your 5K pace for at least 20 minutes, up to 45 minutes. So, every pace that you're doing is 20, you're looking at your 5K pace, not your marathon pace, and not your, so your tempo runs will deviate or, change based on what you're looking at and what you're trying to accomplish. Like, obviously your marathon pace is different than your 5K pace. So let's kind of just look at 5K pace and not worry about your marathon pace. So you're going to run about 20 seconds slower than your 5K pace. And you're going to do that for 45 minutes, So what you're doing is you're allowing your body to adapt to the longer periods at a higher intensity than you're used to. And with doing that, your body's using the oxygen to metabolize more efficiently. And increasing your lactic threshold. And as you keep increasing your lactic threshold, then you will keep increasing your speed. I hope that made sense to everybody. So the other thing I think is important for becoming a stronger runner is training at different ends of the spectrum. So easy runs, hard runs. Easy runs, you're running a minute slower than you normally do. Hard runs, you're doing your tempo runs, or you're doing track work. So you're combining your easy runs, which is I kind of refer to it all day, every day run. So something that you can hold on to for a time frame, and then your hard runs, which is like your, what I call sucking wind. So and then so when you're training at both levels, you're hoping that you're meeting in the middle, and you're allowing your body, 6 weeks, 6 weeks to 8 weeks to adapt to that training at both ends for your goal. And then the other thing that if people know me, they know it's building strength and balance. Core is so important for running. It's not just your legs that are going to get you there. Your whole body's getting you there. Your arm swings, so your core is one of them. Your abs, your hips, your glutes, making them stronger, and also making them stronger bilaterally and unilaterally. I think that you need to work on like one-legged squats. As you can see by these pictures, things doing unilaterally. So, and also plyometrics, burpees, mountain climbers, getting your heart rate up really, really nice and high again. And then the other thing too that I didn't put in here is like when you're running, make sure you're running on a flatter surface. I don't like the terrain of some of the roads. They have, it's too steep, like on the sides of the road. So try to run it on a platform or an area that is more flat. To help try to avoid injuries, and Johnny will go into that. That's his forte. Anyway, so building strength and balance, very, very important. Pre-warm-up and post-stretching, always. Pre-warm-up by doing dynamic stretching per se, high knees, running in place, that type of thing. Post-stretching, always. After you've done a run, you need to stretch, and never stretch cold muscles. So when you say, oh, I'm going to stretch, it's not stretching statically. You need to stretch in the warm-up pace dynamically, and then in the post-stretching, you can be static stretching, but always stretching, trying to keep your muscles loose. It's not too loose, but loose enough that they feel comfortable. And my favorite saying with all of this is you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's just a picture of me when I was doing one of my crazy ultra marathons around an alligator lake down in Texas called Brazo Bend 100. So, it's getting out of your comfort zone and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back to Paula, who will introduce Johnny.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Gert. A lot of great information there. And it is my pleasure to introduce, I don't even know if this man actually needs an introduction, Dr. Johnny King Marino. Dr. Johnny is a certified chiropractic sports physician and the owner of Advanced Spine and Sports Chiropractic with locations in Doylestown and Washington Crossing. He is a triathlete who has competed for Team USA on multiple occasions, completed 8 Ironman races, and run multiple marathons. He currently is the president of the Bucks County Roadrunners and has worked with the local Kenyan running team for over 25 years. And I also like to give a big shout out to his company. He helps so many people, Advanced Spine and Sports Chiropractic, who once again is the title sponsor behind this series. And I know there are a whole lot of people over there doing a lot of hard work behind the scenes and deserve a lot of credit. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Johnny.
Thank you so much, Paul. We'll see if we can get our screen up here. I had a little bit of trouble in our warm-ups.
Looks like it's working.
Is it working? You have my whole screen up there?
You see the whole screen. I don't know if you can go into, if you want to bother going into slideshow, but I think this view works if it works for you.
There we go. Yeah, thank you. Hey, for a little technical difficulty, we had a little trouble in our warm-up session. Anyway, Paul, thank you very much for the introduction and also all the great work that Marshall Financial does, and especially for sponsoring the series and setting up the webinar. Dick Patterson, 26 years now with the 5K series, just the ultimate professional. I appreciate all that you bring to our organization and our town here. It's fabulous. And then, of course, Gert, fabulous information. We'll be talking about the importance of finding a coach. And I think that you couldn't do better than Gert. She's fabulous. She's been in the trenches and she knows what she's talking about. Today's presentation is the 5 most common running injuries and how to avoid them. If you're injured, you're not alone. Almost every runner gets injuries. My little joke is that there's only 2 kinds of runners, those who've been injured and those who will be. If you're training at any high level, the idea is to push your body to the limits, and you never know what your limits are until you actually reach them. And then you kind of stretch the rubber band a little bit too far. We're going to try to stop that by letting you know some of the common things we can do and the easy things we can do to prevent those. The major reasons people get injured are very simple. One is overtraining too much too soon. It's so easy to get excited about training. Your times are getting a little faster. You want to add mileage on faster and faster, and sooner or later you may hit the breaking point and wind up injured. It's important to gradually ramp up your mileage and your training intensity. Improper footwear. Runners only have one really expensive piece of equipment that they need. Well, now that there's Garmin watches, that might be 2, but improper footwear and also footwear that you've used much too long. People often ask me, how long should I keep my running shoes? And it's different for everybody. It depends on the type of shoe. And it also depends on the weight of the runner's pace, and the surfaces. For instance, a 200-pound man is going to wear out a running shoe faster than a 120-pound Kenyan. The Kenyan is running 6-minute miles or 5-minute miles, and they're doing 90-foot strikes a minute. And that 200-pound man may be running 12-minute miles or 10-minute miles, and they're still at 90-foot strikes per minute. So they may literally have twice as many foot strikes per mile plus the added weight. So the shoes can go fast. Lack of sufficient warm-up and post-run strategies. I can't agree with Gert more on this. I think most people just head out the door. We're all busy. We throw our sneakers on and we're down the road trying to make sure we get that first mile in quickly. And that's not a great thing, especially when racing or doing some of your higher intensity efforts. So it's important to establish a routine where you're letting the blood get in your muscles and tendons, and you slowly and gradually bring your body to the point where it's ready for intense exercise. Lack of rest and recovery. Sleep is very important. This is something I always struggle with. There's so many more important things to do than sleep. I've got too many things on my agenda. So that is when you wind up getting hurt. Your body does the majority of its healing when you're resting. That's when your body gets to sort of regenerate its tissues and all your systems or get ready for a great day the next day. Not getting enough sleep is difficult. I think managing having a job and other what we call activities of daily living, we forget that the Kenyan runners or the Ethiopian or the American national champion, they don't have jobs. They are running full time. While you're working, they're getting a massage or taking their afternoon nap, or they're being stretched out by their trainer. So we have to manage running and work. And many of us are working long schedules and we're working on our feet. A contractor who's lifting boards and hammering wood and carrying large objects, that is what I call cross training. And they might want to reduce some of their training to account for this stress and wear and tear on their body. And when we say poor sleep habits, that's trying to set your body up like a clock, get up at the same time and go to bed at the same time every day. That really helps your what's called circadian rhythms and your body's rhythms develop. So we're going to talk about the first of the most common injuries, and that's shin splints. The medical term for this is posterior tibialis friction syndrome, if anyone's really interested, but for our purposes, we'll call them shin splints. The posterior tibialis muscle is right along there, if you can see my pointer, and frequently the pain can be anywhere along here. This chart says here, we frequently find it at the bottom where the tibia or the shin bone meets the ankle, because that's where there's a lot of force. It'll begin as a kind of a uncomfortable feeling, and it may get worse and worse as you keep running. Shin splints, since it is the tendon of the tibialis muscle that's affected, normally will hurt more when you first start running, and it'll start calming down as you go. And then when you stop, it may start hurting again. For those of you who played basketball in high school or doing any type of sprinting activity, sprinting on those hardwood floors frequently caused it. Usually with runners, they get excited and they wind up with shin splints. It's common in beginning runners more so than established runners. Established runners, unfortunately, will ignore the shin splint pain and move right on to stress fractures or stress reactions, which is a much more serious form of that. A stress fracture or stress reaction will present initially like a shin splint, but as time goes on, the pain will be progressive throughout the run, whereas a shin splint pain will slowly reduce and slowly get better over time until you stop. Tendons are sort of like that. We'll discuss that more later. The second most common condition is runner's knee. Runner's knee is also known as patellofemoral syndrome. You'll sometimes hear it as chondromalacia patella, which is an old phrase, or jumper's knee. They're all pretty much the same. Patella is the 50-cent medical term for your kneecap. That's right here. The femur or the thigh bone connects to the shin bone, as we like to call it, and the patella has to glide freely along this tendon. If some muscles are overdeveloped on one side rather than the other, you'll wind up having that patella track out or in, and you'll wind up with an irritation of the cartilage that's under there. When that cartilage gets irritated over time, it can also irritate the tendon. Sometimes the pain comes from the tendon, and as it gets worse, you may start developing issues with the cartilage that's underneath there. So like any other tendinous issue, as it starts out, you'll have some pain. The pain may diminish as you go along. And then after you stop and blood is relieved of its duty in that area, you'll start feeling uncomfortable again. You'll finish your run, you'll be chatting with your friends, and you start walking, and there it is again. Or when you get out of the car, if you're driving someplace. It has to be differentiated from the next most common injury, or one of the next most common injuries, which is iliotibial band syndrome, or ITB syndrome, as they call it. The iliotibial band is a band of tissue that goes from the top of your hip up here, past your knee, onto the lateral portion of your shin area called the fibula, this muscle that goes from here. You can differentiate the pain. I call the iliotibial band syndrome sort of the ninja warrior of pain, because you'll start running and you'll feel nothing, you'll think you're okay, and then 10, 15 minutes in, the ninja will come out and put an ice pick in the side of your leg. Running on iliotibial band syndrome is a bad idea. I find that runners who run through that injury wind up having a lot of complications and a much longer recovery. So if you do have that type of pain, I suggest you just walk it in and live to run another day. And we'll talk about what to do to treat that. You can also differentiate those two types of injuries, the patellofemoral or runner's knee and iliotibial band syndrome, based on climbing, where your ITB syndrome, usually if you're going downhill or down the steps, it'll be more uncomfortable. Whereas your patellofemoral syndrome / runner's knee, you usually feel that as you're climbing up the steps or if you're running uphill. So they're similar in that the location of their pain is very similar, but their actions are different. Many times, iliotibial band syndrome, if it's chronic, can also lead to patellofemoral because of the recruitment of some of the muscles there, and vice versa, which is why it's important not to run through some of these injuries. And we'll talk about some simple rules of when it is safe to run when you have some type of pain. The next injury we'll talk about is Achilles tendinitis. The Achilles tendon is the tendon that your calf muscles, your gastrocnemius and soleus form, and it goes from your calf all the way down to your heel, and it actually attaches underneath here. It's frequently a pain since it's a tendon injury that starts when you first start running. You'll feel the pain. Sometimes when you get out of bed at night, or in the morning, as you're walking and you're stiff, you'll feel it, for many of your steps until it finally loosens up. It can be a serious condition, and that long-term Achilles tendinitis can lead to a deformation of the tendon. And you'll see some runners with a big knot on the back of their leg, and that can be the source of an Achilles rupture, which is very, very serious and requires surgery to be repaired. That injury also there's a similar injury called Retrocalcaneal Bursitis, which is a pain that's more back here, and that's can be differentiated also by the type and onset of pain. With the heel pain in the back, that usually is very painful throughout the run. It's not going to loosen up the way that Achilles tendinitis does. So we'll talk about how to treat some of these injuries in a little bit and some simple steps to avoid them. The last one we'll talk about, number 5, and believe me, there's many more injuries we could discuss, but this is what our time allows us, is plantar fasciitis. The plantar fascia is a fibrous band of tissue, fascial tissue, which is sort of like the saran wrap of your muscle. Muscles would actually sort of stick together if they weren't separated by fascia, and we don't want those muscles to form adhesion. So there's a fascial separation, a saran wrap between them. And in that saran wrap is a lubricant, a lymphatic tissue, or that will smooth out the muscle as it glides through there. When the fascia becomes tight, it starts kind of pushing that tissue out. It starts tightening and irritating the insertion right here where you see the little red spot. That's almost always where it is. And I'll stick my thumb in there and people will swear at me. So it's very, very painful when you touch it. That injury is also one that can tend to build up over time. You may have good days with little pain, and other days may be really, really painful. We'll talk about some treatment for those types of injuries in just a little bit when we get to the next slide. So as I said before, the plantar fasciitis is a heel pain under your foot that you'll feel primarily when you first start running, unless it's really bad. It usually loosens up enough to be tolerable over time until it gets fairly serious if it goes untreated. Stay well and keep running. I'm going to recommend first that you get some guidance. I think people give the sport of running a little disrespect. Like if you're going to play tennis, you'll get tennis lessons. If you're going to take up golf, you'll see a golf pro. People think all they need to learn how to run is to pick up a pair of running shoes, and it's really not true. A good running coach will give you guidance on proper form, proper cadence, as Gert had suggested earlier, running shoes that are good for you, and also just a strategy to keep you from being injured. Cross training is really important. In my late 30s, I almost quit running because I was having so many injuries, and I was just running, and when I didn't run fast enough, I just ran more, which really wasn't working for me. So I started incorporating cycling, weightlifting, and swimming, and I became a triathlete. And the interesting thing is, as a triathlete running many less miles, I was able to run times faster than my 20s and 30s when I was in my 40s, and I was a lot less injury prone. As we discussed before, rest up, sleep. It's very important. Sleep is when your body heals up, and there's no replacement. I wish there was a pill for sleep instead of a sleeping pill, but that just hasn't been invented yet. Change your shoes often. People always ask me how many miles, as I said before, and as we said, that's very variable. Shoes also degrade just by being exposed to air and sunlight. So you really want to change your shoes every few months. I recommend that you have more than one pair of shoes to run in. Your longer runs, you might want something that's a little more cushioned, a little more durable. Whereas when you're doing those great tempo workouts or speed work, you might want a lighter shoe that's a little more responsive and helps you build some of those muscles for the faster paces that you'll be running. In terms of treating some of these injuries, there's a few modalities that just about everybody has, and people frequently ask me, like, when should I use ice and when should I use heat? Well, there's not a direct answer for that. You can use ice and heat all of the time. They just have different, that modality is different for each one of those injuries. For instance, ice always helps with pain, unless it's frostbite, of course, but ice helps with pain. So if you have an injury and it hurts, you can put ice on it for 10 or 15 minutes. Some tissues don't do well with that. For instance, prolonged icing of the IT band is a little bit problematic. So I recommend keeping ice off of that. But for the most part, you can ice any area for 5 to 10 minutes, and then that will help with the pain. It also is very good for swelling. Heat, on the other hand, helps with muscle spasm. It helps improve lymphatic flow. It brings more blood to the area, and it's very soothing. A lot of times people are able to use heat prior to running to warm up their muscles because it draws blood to that area. So there is not a clear-cut right and wrong time to use heat or ice, but I do recommend getting a good ice pack or two, and also a moist heating pad, either electric, or you can take your gel ice pack and heat it up with a warm cloth around it. Just be careful not to burn yourself. Also, in terms of your pre-run and post-run recovery strategy, your pre-run should not, and Gert pointed this out too, consist of static stretching. You want to be doing movement-based exercises. People always worry about whether or not they're flexible enough. Well, runners don't have to be gymnasts or ballet dancers in order to be successful at running. In fact, ballet dancers and gymnasts might be prone to different injuries that runners aren't. You only need to be mobile. Mobility is really much more important than flexibility. You want to be mobile so that your body can move through the motions you need to run. Your arms need to be fluid, your hips need to be fluid, at your knees, ankles, etc. So long as you can move through those motions without restriction, that's the amount of flexibility you need. However, stretching after a run is very, very important because it helps relieve some of the tension in the muscles, it brings blood to the area, and it relieves some of the stress and strain on the tendons. I'm more of a foam roller person. I think the foam roller is a wonderful device pre and post exercise because it doesn't produce some of the irritation of the tendons that you do from stretching, especially as you get older. So as I said, heat for spasm, heat for soreness, ice for pain, and stay off the IT band if you can. You can also alternate ice and heat briefly. 30 minutes of cold, alternating cold and heat or more. So 2 minutes of an ice pack, 2 minutes in a hot bath, and you just repeat that for about 40 minutes. The ice will constrict the blood vessels and help get rid of some of the pain. The heat will actually expand or dilate the blood vessels to bring blood in the area. And that will actually help you heal much faster by bringing larger quantities of blood to the area than you would using either one of those modalities singularly. So in terms of that, foam rolling, stretching, get your rest, and foam rolling are really important. The last thing I'll say, which is hard to say, is hard to tell an athlete who really wants to improve, is learn to have fun. And I'll get, fun is when I do well. Well, you'll do well if you're having fun and you're not really abusing yourself. This is not your job. This is a hobby. You shouldn't be staying up at night worrying about your next 5K or half marathon. You should be planning it and enjoying it. Running should be relieving the stress of your regular life, your real life. It should be creating more. So try to keep it in perspective. You know, no matter how fast you are, there's always somebody faster. And no matter how slow you are, there's always somebody slower. So the most important thing, if you want to make running and racing part of your lifetime, to take it seriously as an important hobby, not your job. So anyway, I want to thank Gert and Paula and Dick for having me, and I'm going to turn things back over to Paula. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Johnny. That was, and Gert, that was a lot of really great information. We do have some questions that came through. So maybe for question is, any tips on how to transition from running mostly inside during, the winter months, now the weather's starting to get better, to transitioning to back on the trail or road running?
Yeah, good question. So, when you're running on a treadmill and you've been doing it for any length of time, you're using more of your front muscles, like your quads, to lift your leg up and pull forward. And when you're running outside, you're transitioning to using more of your hamstrings and you're pushing. So you're pushing the ground away versus on a treadmill, you're lifting your leg up to go forward. So it is a transition, and it probably should be, if you haven't been running outside, don't think you're just going to go from a treadmill to outside and not have some different aches and pains, put it that way. I'm not going to say major aches and pains, but you're using the muscles outside, you're using your hamstrings outside more than you're using them inside on a treadmill. So I guess I would just go up carefully and just, enjoy being outside. And, like I said, if you're running 5 miles on the treadmill, maybe it's not 5 miles outside the first time. Maybe it's, maybe it's 3 miles. But, go out and enjoy yourself and really kind of transition smoothly to outside. I wouldn't, go full force outside. I don't know, Johnny, as far as you can see, injury from transitioning from one to the other.
I think you nailed it, Gert. Running on a treadmill is a much softer surface than the road. So going right from running on a treadmill that has much more give to running on asphalt can create some problems. So I think you hit the mark on there. Gradually bring your distance up if you're switching from a treadmill to the road. A treadmill can be faster sometimes because you're not fighting the wind or other variables. And I think if you have your treadmill flat, it's actually a little faster. It's great training for Broad Street, which is primarily downhill, but I do agree with you. You'd have to be really careful transitioning.
Okay. Thank you. So another question here, you both talked about pre-run and post-run activities. So how long should a post-run stretch session last, and how many stretches should somebody do?
How much time do you have? As runners, we all know that, we're on to the next thing, right? We go out and run our 5 miles or 3 miles or whatever it is. And, then we're rushing home to take care of business, doing something else. So my thing is just make sure you do it at some point. You don't have to spend major time every time you go out and run, but you have to spend some time. You have to do, get your hamstring, get your quad, get your calf, stretch out your glutes, really just everything. Even your arms, stretching out your arms, you getting your triceps, just kind of an overall body stretch is great. And then, at least a couple times a week, really do a really good stretch. So, I mean, if you're like most runners, you get done and you get to the corner and you get on the curb and you stretch your calf and you do, a couple of things, just do it. And make it feel good. I mean, I love stretching. I think it's really great for me anyway.
And I would add that, stretching frequently is as important. I always use the cat dog analogy. When your cat gets up, it stretches for a couple of minutes and then it runs off. And same thing with your dog. And if you throw the little mouse toy at the cat, it's going to jump up and not pull a hamstring when it sprints to it. And the same thing when you throw a ball for your dog. I think that many people will spend a significant amount of time after running, stretching, then they sit in a chair for 5 hours and they think they're done with it. I think it's important to do a little bit of stretching each and every time you begin to move. It could be just putting your foot up on a chair. It could be, reaching up for the sky. I recommend that people put a timer on their phone that goes off 30 minutes and just sort of run around their desk a little bit, reach the sky, tilt right, tilt left, bend over a little bit and get some blood into your system. That's just important. And as Gert said, yeah, taking a couple times a week where you really work on the flexibility and mobility portion of it is great. Like Gert alluded to, I think many people think that they have to stretch for 45 minutes because runners are all or nothing kind of people. If you only have time to stretch for 5 minutes after your run, then spend that 5 minutes and really work it as much as you can within the time allotted. Don't not do it because you can't do it as long as you think you should.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is Johnny alluded to in his thing is foam rolling. So, those days that you can, foam rolling is so expensive, and get that little crossball. We all have that little crossball to work out in some of your muscles too. So.
Great. So here's another question. So what's a good balance of easy days and workouts with speed days if you're trying to improve on pace consistently?
Great question. Crystal ball, right? That's kind of a loaded question because, there's age issues, 40, 50-year-olds don't recover as well as 20-year-olds. So, you have to balance that also. Cross training is, that we've said over and over again is key. I'm a fresh leg person. The day before a race, if I'll do maybe a mile to loosen up a little bit, but I like fresh legs, and I think you can't get better unless you actually recover. If you keep going out on tired legs, you're never going to get better. You need to take a break. So running, speed work, hill work, everybody has to look at their own. Maybe it's not a 7-day calendar. Maybe it's a 10-day calendar. 10-day week. It's so instead of saying, okay, I've got to fit all of this in 7 days, maybe you fit it in 10 days. Again, and a lot of it I think has to do with your age. 20-year-old can probably fit a lot more in their schedule and bounce back faster than a 40-year-old. So cross training, doing some speed work, some hill work, and some just regular tempo work and easy runs. Again, both Johnny and I said, have fun running, enjoy it. I think sometimes when you're stressed out too much about it, it really can be overwhelming.
Yeah, and as I think the simple rule for that is your easy days are really meant to be easy, and so many people hammer their easy days because they're with their friends. And I think one of the best inventions and worst inventions is the GPS watch. Especially with everyone sharing what they do, you don't feel great. And, as soon as you press that button, Strava's going to tell everyone you suck. So you got to be really careful because no one wants to see that. But it's important to stick with your program. There was a great triathlete who won the Ironman in Kona 7 times. A woman won at 8, by the way. Kudos to the ladies. But he would train with his friends and they would drop him in the off season all the time, because they would get in these bike races or run races during routine training, and pride would get in, and he never varied from his training. It was easy days were easy, hard days were hard. He used the heart rate monitor, which I know is very effective, but it'll drive you crazy sometimes. And they'd all win the training and they'd lose the races. So stick with your coach's program or the program you set up and take it easy on your easy days so you have the energy to go hard on your hard days.
Is there a minimum number of rest days you incorporate in that schedule, like where you do absolutely nothing, or is that like a stretching mobility day?
I like to call it active recovery, Gert. I don't know, you probably speak to this too. It counts as, stretching for 45 minutes is exercise. Or if you're doing yoga for 45 minutes or getting on your bike and doing some soft pedal to get like blood in there, or even going for like a long walk. If you walk for an hour at a brisk pace, it doesn't beat your body up, but you still get your heart going and things like that. So you can do active training, go swimming that day. Not going to beat up your legs, just do something different. I think depending on the distance, you need to run at least 3 days a week with some other training. I like to run 4, but or unless I'm doing a lot of cycling.
Yeah, again, it really depends what you're training for, right? It's really what it comes down to.
Great advice. Another question here says, I'm considering running a 5K trail run in late August. but have never done this before. Any tips, suggestions to prepare for an event like this?
Okay, so I'm assuming so I'm going to make a big assumption is that you can run a 5K road race. So yeah, you're transitioning from 5K road race to a trail race. It's very easy to transition. And that's one of the things that I actually, when I work with some runners, I ask them, like, what are your goals, and what, if you're doing a race, what are you running on? Because people automatically assume that I'm going to run a marathon and it's going to be a road marathon, or it's going to be whatever. Everywhere they go, you have different things. You incorporate hills, you incorporate whatever your races that you're going to do. You need to incorporate that in your training program. So this is a great question. So now you're transitioning from a road race to a trail race. So you know what? Start easy, get on a trail. And again, a lot of trails, there are some, what do you call it, towpath trails, races, but not a lot of them. Most of the people, when they say trail, they mean up in the mountains, like up the hills. And so I'm going to make an assumption that that's what this is. It's a trail. Actually, Bucks County Roadrunners has a group that meets at Washington's Crossing on Saturday mornings at 7:30. They have a great group of people that run there. Go run with them. Find people that are running in the woods. I guess I would start with some easier trails. And the one thing that's really interesting with trail running versus road running, nobody would ever think to walk a 5K at some point. Like, yes, there are walkers of races, and that's great. But if you're a runner, and you're, I don't know, let me step back a second. So in trail running, there are a lot of times you're running uphill, and most times your trail runners are not running uphill, they're walking uphill. That was a big eye opener for me, because I'm so used to running uphill that in trails, they beat you up, the trail hills. So, transition to that, like go walk up hills real fast. Again, it's just, get into the terrain and try to do what you are going to be running the race at. That's all.
The only thing I would add to that is mosquito and tick repellent.
Good point.
Otherwise, everything Gert said is spot on.
Great. So Dr. Johnny, like if you're injured, what do you say about how do you stay fit when you're injured?
Well, there's a degrees of injury that I call it the rule of 3 or 4. If you have an injury that hurts when you first start running, and it's less than a 4 or 3 or 4 in a pain scale, now that's sort of a treacherous slope we walk on, because what's like a 10 for a man is a 3 for most women, but we'll just pretend that they know. But so you're running and it's a 3 or a 4 and it slowly dissipates or doesn't increase, you can train on that. But if the pain increases as you go, that's when it's dangerous. Or if you finish running and you're a little sore and you can't walk, that's the time to really cut it back and start assessing what is the injury, get it diagnosed, and start working on it. Cross training is really important. When you're injured, you can stay in phenomenal shape. My fastest Ironman marathon was at Lake Placid on a hilly course, faster than the flat Florida course, Louisville, all that. I tore my calf and I couldn't run from April to May, and then I tore it again in May, and I couldn't run until July. I did one long run, but I biked my brains out, and it was my fastest marathon by 5 minutes in an Ironman. It would have qualified me for Boston at that time, even though I rode 112 miles up hills and did all the swimming. So you can train without running. Bob Kempinen broke the Olympic marathon trials record, even though he had a stress fracture and couldn't run a step for 8 weeks prior to the trial. He just did all water running. So cross training effectively is really important. And I think the reason runners try to train through things is, 1, running is addicting, and 2, they're afraid that their competitors or their goal will get too far in front of them to catch up. So assess the injury. Remember, training on an injured area leads to injuries in other areas, as well as a prolonged recovery for that particular injury. So use the rule of 3 or 4 and make sure that the pain isn't increasing. Get it assessed. It's important to get an assessment of what's going on there. And there's a lot of information online, and some of it's great and some of it's dangerous. So make sure that if it's not getting better, you seek care from a healthcare professional. That's very important. Does that sort of answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. Couple other questions here. So I don't know, do you love or hate the taper?
Hate the taper, hate the taper. As Johnny kind of alluded to, like, you always feel like you're not ready when it comes to race day because you don't feel like you've trained enough. And so, you keep adding more. And, I'm going to say this question was probably, going towards a marathon, because you don't really taper for 5Ks, other than not run the day before or whatever your routine is. But with marathon training, you're just, you're adding the miles over time, over an 18-week, 20-week period. And, every weekend it's dedicated to going those long miles. So even sometimes, when you put a schedule together, you say, okay, one weekend you're doing a 12-mile run, and then the next weekend you're doing a 10-mile run. You're like, oh no, should maybe go, more. I'm like, no, you got to pull back a little bit. You got to gradually keep adding and taking those miles. So then when you get to 20, 22 miles, depending on what your program calls for, and then the next week you're down to like 15, you're like, oh my God, because then, a week or two later is the marathon. You're like, I'm not going to be ready. You will be ready. Again, I'm a firm believer in fresh legs, and sometimes you just got to pull back a little bit. You've got to, get your, you've got to get, again, fresh legs, and get those muscles a little bit, not as tired. If tired legs and tired things usually evolve to injuries. So you really need to know when to pull back.
And I can't agree more. And I also think that, from the science shows that the training you do, 3 weeks prior to a longer event, should consist of shorter bursts, working more of your anaerobic system and not putting in a bunch of miles. A 20-mile run will benefit you 3 or 4 weeks later, not then. And also takes, the 1 day recovery for every mile run on a long run, to be completely recovered. So if you're doing 20 miles, I have friends who've run Boston a million times, and they'll get injured 3 weeks before and they'll feel a little better. So they'll do a 20-mile run the week before, because in their mind, they have to get that in, but all they did was tire their legs out. So it's important, I think, like Gert says, to have fresh legs, and you can kind of offset it by doing some higher intensity, shorter duration stuff. It kind of takes some of the flatness out of your same marathon ritual. So I'll usually do some 400-meter repeats at a faster than like a 5K pace, even though that's unusual, just so that I kind of get my energy system prepped up. I also frequently run a 8K or 5K the week before a longer event. And that's just psychological to me. If you're running a longer event, after you've run a 5K or 8K where you're running on all cylinders, you really feel like the marathon pace is a lot slower. And same thing, because I take 5Ks as seriously as people take marathons. Like to me, it's all the pain of a marathon wrapped into 20 minutes or less, So,
I agree.
Yeah, so I will take that very seriously, and I'll train hard, but I'll also taper with those with some higher intensity workouts that are shorter.
I couldn't agree with you more, Johnny. Like, people say to me, like, racing, and I'm like, 5Ks are no joke. They are no, you're at top speed for 3 miles, and I call sucking wind.
If you're doing it right, you're this close to puking at all times. So not running hard enough. So.
I think I've diagnosed my problem then.
Remember Gert's thing about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable?
So maybe one just final question, for someone who's not particularly training for any race, how do you maintain running fitness? Pick a race. Huh?
Yeah, and you know what? And I guess that's when you really kind of can roll back and really enjoy running, finding the love of running again. Again, I think finding the love of running goes a long way. Go out there and run for a reason. Kind of like I said, go out there and start incorporating maybe trail running, incorporate, other things that you've never done before. I think one of the fun things with running is that, you're driving down the street and you're like always wondering, where does that road go? Well, you know what? Go find out on your feet, like next time you're out for a run, say, where does this road go? And go find it. One of the things I said in the very beginning is just meeting new people. I think it's one of the really great sports, and running is a sport where you actually can, meet a lot of different people. I've met so many people starting with running that it's a blessing. It's a total blessing to have met a lot of people. And, I don't know what else to say other than just go out and enjoy it.
And I would say that not having a race is really, it makes you a lot less burnout running. Get together with your friends, run for the joy of it. Also alter with I have so many patients who get up and every day or every 3 days, they do the same 4 miles or 5 miles on the same course in the same direction, in the same shoes, wearing the same clothes, listening to the same music. Like, try running without music. Try running. If you have to run that course, run it backwards. So it looks amazingly different when you approach it from a different direction. Go to the park and run. If you're not racing, you can still do some harder efforts just because it feels good to really blow out all the carbon stuff from your system, like get that blood really going. You don't have to race in order to train hard, and that's really joyful. I find that so many runners who had minor injuries, who were just coming in for tune-ups, who weren't racing, were really enjoying running. They did all miss some of the camaraderie of the groups and things like that. But I will notice there's a lot less injuries, bad for business, but good for you guys when people aren't training for races because they were running, within themselves. They weren't trying to kill themselves. And it was a pleasure to see people just run for the pure joy of it.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. This was so much valuable information, good interactive questions. I think everyone's got some good takeaways. I'd like to bring Dick Patterson back on to kind of wrap things up for us and talk about the 5K series.
Okay. I hope you all enjoyed this webinar and gathered more tips to improve your running and also to avoid injury. By the way, each registrant will receive a recording of this program. Meanwhile, as you think about it, please register to run some or all of the remaining races of our series. You can do that by visiting www.bucks5kseries.com. Finally, I'd like to thank Marshall Financial Group and Paula Nangle for developing the concept and sharing the event. Thanks also to Advanced Spine and Sports Chiropractic for their longtime support of the Bucks 5K series. And of course, thanks are due to Gert Fries and Johnny King Marino for the work they did to develop all the content that you heard today. So good night, but please don't forget to get out tomorrow safely and safely run and enjoy the fresh air. Good night.